All right, everyone. It says I'm live. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear and see me. The hearing part's definitely more important. Welcome to another Monday night. And before we get started, I want to just go ahead and do a quick update on some interesting news that regarding Joe leaving a speech he was just in to get to the situation room. So, really quick, we'll go ahead and jump into that just to kind of give everyone an update on that before we move into some of these threats that are very close to home and why we need to be concerned about it. Okay, so President Joe Biden cuts press conference short as White House confirms Iran actively facilitating some attacks on U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria. And this just came out just a few hours ago. Joe Biden was forced to end his press conference early after news emerged American troops had come under fire on a U.S. military base in Syria and that two further hostages had been released by terror group Hamas. U.S. soldiers have been facing a rise in drone and rocket attacks while stationed in Iraq and southern Syria last week amid ongoing tensions over the Israel-Hamas conflict. On Monday morning, American forces at the Al Tanf in Syria came under attack for a second time by two one-way drones. No injuries were reported. President Biden was speaking at the White House on his Bidenomics agenda, the very successful one, by the way, his economic policy on clean energy and jobs, when he abruptly ended his remarks. "I apologize, I have to go to the Situation Room for another issue I have to deal with," he told the crowd on Monday afternoon before leaving the room. It is not known why he had to be rushed off. The White House on Monday accused Iran of actively facilitating rocket and drone attacks on American troops in Iraq and Syria. Now, I just want to say that there is always a possibility that he just had a medical or even like a bathroom emergency, and that's just how they make that work now. But there's probably more to it than just that, and we have to at least entertain the idea that this is a serious scenario where the president had to be rushed into a situation room. So earlier today, news came out surrounding the idea that Iran was actively facilitating some of these attacks. So things are escalating very quickly. And this is from Reuters, and it's from today, about, say, updated 6 hours ago. So this is all relatively new information. The White House on Monday said Iran was in some cases actively facilitating rocket and drone attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups on U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria. President Biden has directed the Department of Defense to brace for more and respond appropriately. So, White House spokesman John Kirby said there had been an uptick in such attacks over the last week and especially over the last few days, but the U.S. would not allow its interests in the region to go unchallenged. We're very much on our way towards something very negative, or so it seems to me. So, a lot of 5x5s came in. Harbor Prepper, thank you so much. We've got NRVD76 saying 2x457. I can work with that. We also have Morse Venture checking in. Good to see you. We have Vincent Boogaloo is here. We've got, let's see, Jimmy of the Sea as well. Yeah, that $5 bread is tasting so good lately. So, we can get everything started, but I wanted to make sure, Jimbo Alogo, good to see you. I wanted to make sure we at least touched on that relatively breaking news to give everybody an idea of just how quickly things are escalating, and to remind everybody that there is quite the urge within the military-industrial complex to have a hot war with Iran. It's been on the table for a very long time. We know that it was on the list of countries that John McCain and Lindsey Graham decided to give everybody back in the day about, where we should go next. So things are happening very quickly. So I'm trying my best to give you good information while also discussing the things that are more pertinent to you as someone who is either an American citizen or someone who lives in another country that isn't experiencing these things directly right this second, but should be aware of the threats that exist right where you are, regardless of what else is happening. So now that we've got that out of the way, I do want to mention that this live stream is supported by Midway USA, and they're the biggest sponsor of the channel. So a huge thank you to them for always helping me out. And I mean, thanks to them, I'm able to give you this kind of information, which is pretty wild considering, what I do here. So I really appreciate them having that kind of faith in me. Now, Los Angeles is behind enemy lines, says Hugo. Well, we'll talk about some of that here in a minute, but there are some things we have to be very concerned about when it comes to protecting the homeland and threats that are right here on U.S. soil right this second. There's been a lot of talk right around this whole concept of sleeper cells and everything else going on in the country. And of course, that's a hyperbolic term in many ways because it makes people think about these almost like fantastical concepts of these like secret spy agencies or these black ops that exist throughout the country when it could be much more mundane than that, right? But they're becoming more overt as time goes on. And I think that we can see some correlation between these widespread protests and everything else that's happening regarding why these threats exist and how they might not be hiding in caverns underground, but they might just be out in the open without anybody questioning it because of the times that we currently live in. So these are all things we have to keep in mind. And one thing I want to just mention before we jump right into a lot of this information I'm about to share with you is that we have to remember, regardless of our feelings or opinions or our thoughts as to what's happening in the world, regardless of how you feel about who's fighting who or what kind of tactics they're using or any of these other things, right? Like, regardless of any of that, if a country or a group or whoever we're going to refer to considers you the enemy because you're America and you are an American, you are a legitimate target / an enemy of that group or country, regardless of how you feel. If we went to war with China and you were like, I love China and I'd do anything for China, but you're an American citizen, you're still an American in their eyes, and that doesn't matter to them whether or not you like them or don't like them. That's just how war works, unfortunately, for everyone, right? So keep that in mind. You can have the opinions you have, but if you are the enemy, you are still the enemy. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there, because a lot of people seem to be under this impression that by having certain sentiments, it might, I don't know, protect them or make them look better to some kind of foreign entity. Not how I roll. If I'm the enemy, regardless of how I feel about it, I'm the enemy. So let's talk about how there is a lot of discussion and conversation about some of the things that recently happened in Israel and how they could possibly happen here. And I want to just touch on that really quickly because I found this article to be at least intriguing and gives you some insight as to what might have happened there and why things could happen in other places based on complacency. I think this is a big deal for a lot of us out there, considering, like, how did this happen in such a place? You know, how could this happen in a place like Israel where they have all these enemies everywhere and you would assume they'd be prepared for something like this? Okay. We're going to jump right into the middle of the article so I can give you just a quick overview as to why this is important to apply to the rest of this conversation. And I guarantee you that these threats are closer to home, and there's a huge gaping blind spot in everybody's strategy when it comes to planning for where these threats might come from that's not being discussed hardly at all, and it's something that we have to address. This is where the United States must sit up and take note. Complacency is the first enemy of counterterrorism. America has been fortunate since 9/11. Fear of a significant terror attack on our soil has subsided as memories fade. If our intelligence and law enforcement communities can be jostled into a refreshed proactive wariness by what happened this month in Israel, all the better. The president's failure in his remarks to acknowledge a possible consequent threat to the homeland is concerning and signals possible similar complacency among those charged with protecting us. The second startling factor involves the way Hamas attacked on the ground. They deployed a tactic that had not been seen before at that scale. They neutralized a fortified border by flinging well-armed young men by air into southern Israel. They killed with a savagery that shook even the most hardened in the counterterrorism community. This, however, was particularly jarring. The terrorists roam among the citizenry and were unopposed for the most part. No one could fight back. How could this be? Israel's a country surrounded on all sides by belligerents who openly want to annihilate its population, and yet has a puzzling policy strictly limiting private gun ownership. Hamas knew that they would be operating among an unarmed populace. Military and police assets were either too distant or inadequate since the attack Israel appears to be relaxing its restrictions to arm certain civilians. So, just as a quick reminder, this can happen anywhere technically, and especially somewhere where people have become complacent or possibly disarmed. And when I say that, consider the most likely targets here in this country and how unarmed the people are in those populaces based on policy, and why they might be selected for a target of a similar attack based on that exact same strategy. I'm not saying that this is going to happen here. I don't have that information or intel. I'm telling you that if it would happen here, then consider what targets might be selected based on similar selections for where they perpetrated this attack, okay? So every so often on this channel, and once again, I want to thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Every so often on this channel, we go back into history. Oh, and by the way, replay crew, thanks for being here as well and checking in the next day to kind of see what we talked about. We have to go back to remember what has been happening here in this country for quite a while in order to be aware of how close these threats are to home. Well, let's not forget, this happened in 2018, and these people were just convicted of this crime on October 20th, or at least that's when it was reported on, okay? A father and family members are convicted in terrorism and kidnapping case that resulted in the death of a 3-year-old boy on a New Mexico compound. If you don't remember this, there was a compound in New Mexico that was training extremists most likely to attack places like schools, right? This is a legitimate thing that happened. And yet people are scoffing at the idea of sleeper cells existing here in the United States. But this is mainstream news. I'm not saying that mainstream is reliable or factual in everything they report, but this was from 2018. These people are just convicted of this, and these people are operating in an off-grid compound where they're training young people to perpetrate attacks in the future. A federal jury convicted 4 members of the family Tuesday after their 2018 arrest following a raid at the rural New Mexico compound, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Mexico said in a news release on Friday. Officers were searching the compound for 3-year-old Abdul Ghani Wahaj, I believe I said correctly, who had been abducted by his father, Siraj ibn Wahaj, from his wife in Georgia, authorities said. The boy's decomposed remains were found at the compound, authorities said. During the raid, authorities also found 11 emaciated children wearing rags and no shoes. The group had apparently been living off the grid for months in the trash-ridden lot. Jurors convicted Siraj ibn Wahaj and his brother-in-law, Lucas Morton, on charges including conspiracy to provide material support to terrorists, providing material support to terrorists, and conspiracy to murder an officer or employee of the United States. Jury verdict sheets show. Morton was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit kidnapping resulting in death and kidnapping resulting in death, according to the jury sheets. This has really happened. Like, this is not some concept that's made up and created to stir everyone up. Like, these are legitimate threats. And yet a lot of people are out there saying this is all BS and this is just fear mongering, and sleeper cells are just a false concept that are used to scare people into submission. I mean, I guess if you want to believe that. Like I said, I don't have direct knowledge of these things because I wasn't there in New Mexico, but this was reported on and was told to everyone about back in 2018 when there wouldn't be as much leverage to use it to anyone's advantage as there would be right now. Let's see here. Wasn't there links to John Brown at that camp? You know what, Gregor Zamina? I'm not sure, to be honest with you. So that's something that you might want to look into further, but there's a lot of weird connections when we talk about some of the things we're moving into right this second. So, and look, we have to be prepared for crazy events to unfold here. We have to be prepared for the worst. Anything can happen at any point in time. We are in a global conflict. And so I've listened to other YouTube commentators and other political pundits, and I try my best to read and research from all different perspectives. And one thing that we seem to share in is that, people keep talking about how, this could start World War III. What do you mean this could start World War III? Like, what is your standard for what actually dictates the start of World War III? You need to operate under the assumption that it's already begun. Don't expect a nuclear bomb to be the start of World War III. That's not how this whole thing starts. That's not how World War I started. Why would World War III start with the big finale, right? So operate under the assumption that we're in World War III and stop talking about this might start it. Like, we are in it. And that's why I mentioned that whole situation about the enemies, right? If someone considers Americans their enemy, then I'm their enemy no matter how I feel about them. That's why we have to remove ourselves from this argument of choose a side. It's ridiculous because the sides have been chosen for us by those who are in power that we have no power over. Like, I don't have a choice as to what the U.S. government does next. That's not up to me. But if the U.S. government creates enemies and those enemies see America as the enemy, I am now the enemy. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that tonight, but I think it's very important for us to understand that. Your opinion doesn't matter once that happens, okay? So, let's see here. Iranian-backed sleeper cell militants hibernating in U.S. position for attack. Wow, this is crazy information. I can't believe this is being put out right now. It wasn't. It was put out in 2018. But there's some important information in here that I want to share with you because it just goes to show how close we are to everything occurring, okay? And this whole Iran situation is only going to get worse, especially based on a lot of this information, okay? Iranian-backed militants. Now, we're not talking about Hamas or anything in particular. We're talking about Iranian-backed militants and especially Hezbollah are operating across the United States mostly unfettered, raising concerns in Congress and among regional experts that these sleeper cell agents are poised to launch a large-scale attack on the American homeland, according to testimony before lawmakers. This is from 5 years ago. Do you think they've just magically gone away? Do you think we've solved any of this over that period of time. Of course we haven't, okay? A chief concern is Iranian support for Hezbollah, which is active in the Middle East, Latin America, which we will talk about here very soon. Latin America is our backyard. Latin America is not often considered when it comes to World War III, right? China, Russia, the Middle East. What about Latin America? It's our back door, and the worst kind of back door. There's mounting evidence that Iran poses a direct threat to the homeland, according to Rep. Peter King. Okay? A chief concern is Iranian support for Hezbollah, which is active in the Middle East, Latin America, and here in the U.S., where Hezbollah operatives have been arrested for activities conducted in our own country. Both individuals received significant weapons training from Hezbollah, King said, referring to a recent arrest of 2 individuals plotting terror attacks in New York City and Michigan. It is clear that Hezbollah has the will and the capability. They're arresting people for this kind of activity 5 years ago. How do you think it's looking right this second based on recent escalations? They are as good or better at explosive devices than ISIS. They are better at assassinations and developing assassination cells, said Michael Pregent, a former intelligence officer who worked to counter Iranian influence in the region. They're better at targeting, better at looking at things, and they can outsource attacks to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is smart. They're very good at keeping their communications secure, keeping their operational security secure, and again, from a high-profile attack perspective, they'd be good at improvised explosive devices. Okay? This is just where we are, okay? Now, hold on one second. I got to find my next little point here. Aha! Here we are. I keep trying to tell everybody about this. I know it's not as exciting as nuclear doomsday planes flying around the planet. I know it's not as exciting as Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas attacking Israel and Syria and everything else related to it, right? Like, I understand that. But this is here. This is why I'm trying to drive this home. Like, this is here in the United States. This is our most likely threat. World War III happens, a nukes launch, it's everybody's problem, right? So we're all dealing with that no matter where you live or who you are, okay? It just is what it is at that point. Whether or not it hits you the hardest economically or nuclear fallout hits you, whatever it is, it's going to ruin everybody's day. But this is here in the United States, okay? Among the most pressing threats to the U.S. homeland is Hezbollah's deep penetration throughout Latin America, where it finances its terror activities by teaming up with drug cartels and crime syndicates. What? What do you mean they're connected? There's no way. Iran's proxy terror networks in Latin America are run by Tehran's wholly owned Lebanese franchise Hezbollah, according to Ottolenghi. These networks are equal part crime and part terror and have the ability to provide funding and logistics to militant fighters. Their presence in Latin America must be viewed as a forward operating base against America's interest in the region and the homeland itself. This is legitimately an issue. These Hezbollah operatives exploit loopholes in the U.S. immigration system to enter America under the guise of legitimate business. Okay. Latin America is a big deal. It's not hardly ever reported on. No one really brings it up a lot. It is a huge security concern for us. We're going to talk about that right now. These threats are close to home. Whether or not they're literally in the United States or they're in South America, we're not as impenetrable because of our distance via ocean as we used to be. That used to protect us from quite a bit. Oh, well, you've got to cross the Pacific or the Atlantic to get here or go over the North Pole. I mean, how else are you going to get here? But South America is a different story. There's a lot of reasons why we've had so much control over certain aspects of Central America over the last few centuries, right? Like, there's been a lot of reasons behind that, but that control might be breaking down a little bit, okay? And I'm sorry to take you on this history lesson tonight, but I have to ensure that you understand just how proximal some of these dangers and these threats actually are. Like, this is not hearsay. This is not conspiracy. This is not theoretical or hypothetical at this point in time. This is what we have to deal with and prepare for, okay? So, Latin America? Yes, Latin America. 2019, similar article. Inside Hezbollah's American sleeper cells, waiting for Iran's signal to strike U.S. and Israeli targets. Wait a second. So Hezbollah could be concerned about striking, Israeli and U.S. targets based on what Iran requests from them. I wonder if any of this could be connected. I wonder if any of this might escalate based on current situations. I wonder if this whole sleeper cell debacle is made up because of the last few weeks, right? No, wait. Well, this is from 4 years ago, but I guess they really planned out a lot of this information to make you just freak out over the last 4 weeks, right? But here's some interesting stuff I want to bring up here, okay? I'm going to find it, I promise. See, I'm not going to make you read this whole article. There's a lot of similarities from what we just talked about. The most, okay? These are talks about Hezbollah and Iranian operative activities in our country as well as our allies' countries, okay? The most alarming case, in 2019 at least, took place in the United States and Canada. According to U.S. prosecutors, two U.S.-based Hezbollah IJO operatives, Ali Karani and Samir El-Debek, were tasked with carrying out pre-operational surveillance for potential Hezbollah attacks in the United States and Panama. Pre-operational surveillance, I wonder if they figured out where their targets are yet. Authorities allege Debek was sent to Thailand to shut down a Hezbollah explosives lab, and that Ali Karani was directed to identify Israelis in New York who could be targeted by Hezbollah and to find people from whom he could procure arms that Hezbollah could stockpile in the area. Karani also conducted surveillance of New York and Toronto airports, as well as of FBI, Secret Service, and U.S. military facilities in New York City. Okay? Now, there is another aspect of this that I wanted to bring up where I'm trying to find it really quickly here for you. Okay. Hezbollah's last successful attack targeted Israeli tourists in Burgas, Bulgaria in 2012. But a long list of other plots have since been foiled around the world in places as far afield as Bolivia, Cyprus, Peru, Thailand, and the United Kingdom. Hezbollah pre-operational surveillance occurred in Canada, Panama, and the U.S. and elsewhere. Okay, Panama. That is something that I want you to be very aware of because Panama is a big deal. We need to give it more credit for how important it is to our supply chain logistics and in general for the entire world's economy. Panama has a lot going on, okay? Now, I want you to keep Panama in mind. And I do want to also mention that Genesis Gold Group is a big supporter of this channel, and they have specifically supported my live streams here. So if you're looking to get your assets backed by a more stabilized asset like gold and silver, go to magicpreppergold.com. It helps me out a lot. It also will help you out if that's what you decide is best for you. And the guys over at Genesis Gold Group can help you make that decision, whereas I cannot since I'm not a financial advisor. But if you go to magicpreppergold.com and you roll over your retirement account into a gold-backed IRA or whatever you want to do, you get gold and silver, I get lead and brass, and we make this thing happen. So check them out if that's something that's up your alley or something you're interested in. And I've got links down below in the description as well as in the pinned comment. And I appreciate them helping me out with these live streams because life is just getting expensive. I don't know what else to say. And things are getting very uncertain every single day. And I'm doing my best here to try to make it all work, okay? And, life is also very strange when it just comes to, the price of things as well. Because gold is almost at $2,000 an ounce now. And for a while, it was sitting around $1,600. So keep that in mind as well. So remember Panama, how we were literally just talking about that before 20 people left because I mentioned a sponsor? Well, Panama. This is from this year. Wait, what? Now we're back to this year? Yeah, we're going to talk about things that are happening right now too, but you have to have some historical context and precedent to understand the threat level. If I just tell you, this just happened right now, and this is the craziest thing that's ever happened, but you don't know that all these other stepping stones have been put into place over the past couple of decades for these things to finally exist, then you won't have the same reaction or the same concept as to what's actually occurring. So we have to have these conversations. And at first, Iran to establish military presence in Panama Canal. Gee, it's almost like they set everything up to be able to have their military presence in the Panama Canal before a lot of this stuff that's happening right now occurred. I have no idea why they might have done that. It's not very strategic now, is it? For the first time, Iran's Navy will station vessels in the Panama Canal, a vital economic artery in America's backyard that has never seen an Iranian military presence. Never until this year. The commander of Iran's Navy, Rear Admiral Shahram Irani, confirmed on Wednesday that Iranian forces will establish a presence in the Panama Canal later this year, marking the first time Iran's military has reached the Pacific Ocean. This comes as Iran has been cementing ties with Latin American countries, most notably Venezuela. What? I can't believe they're talking about Latin America again. It's almost like there could be an issue with Latin America. Iran, is cementing ties with Venezuela. Anyway, In recent years, with the framework of the country's development roadmap, Iranian ships have docked in Venezuela more regularly, as the two countries share a similar history of enduring excruciating sanctions by the US and its allies. Wonder if that might make them mad enough to stage an attack. Who knows? Iran frequently delivers fuel to Venezuela and often helps it sell its oil abroad, as Iran possesses the necessary refineries to turn crude oil into high value consumer products such as gas. Okay. In February this year, the two countries announced that direct flights between Tehran and Caracas will become operational starting in August? Wait, when was August? Was 2 months ago? Okay. I wonder if that actually happened or not. In June, the two countries' leaders concluded a 20-year cooperation plan to expand joint cooperation in various sectors, such as oil, banking, and the economy. Man, there's a lot happening between Iran and Venezuela. Yeah, and they got flights going there now, and they're providing them with fuel, and they've been docking their naval vessels there on a regular basis, and they're just really, really tight. Not to mention, they also have their establishment here in the Panama now, and Panama Canal is a vital artery for the global economy, especially here in the Western Hemisphere, where we heavily rely on it to get things from one side of the earth to the other, basically, when it comes to the two oceans that are split apart by Panama. So I wonder if Panama and the canal there might be, I don't know, a strategic target. And the fact that they have all this, I don't know, pre-operational surveillance occurring there from these groups like Hezbollah, which are backed by Iran. And then they're actually working with Venezuela on having direct flights there. And it's the thing is, the big thing, the takeaway here is that none of these things are actually connected. And we're not actually in a global conflict. It's all just individual, right? Everything is completely separate from each other because, Hamas and Israel, that's one thing. And then Ukraine and Russia, that's one thing. And then Iran and Venezuela doing all this stuff. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with what we have going on here, except for Hezbollah's involvement with the drug cartels, which are setting up a lot of interesting activities in the United States. And then what? Oh, wait, hold on. What was that? What'd you guys say? Oh, Venezuelans top Mexicans in U.S. illegal border crossings for first time on record in September. What? I mean, it's almost like that happened right after Iran established their direct flights to Caracas and have been working together. And I don't know how to connect these dots anymore. I don't actually think any of this has anything to do with anything. Like I said, operate as if you're in World War III. Let's stop talking about this could start it. What do you mean? What do you mean? What else could start it? Some guy slipping on a Twinkie in his palace over in Saudi Arabia and deciding it was somebody else's fault, right? That could start World War III. Here we are in it, so let's talk about it like we're in it, so we can stop, I don't know, placating ourselves or being comfortable. I'm not sure what the point of all that is, but this is breaking news, published October 22nd. I hope by building that roadmap to how we got to this helps explain why we need to go back in history, why we need to look at things that have happened in our recent, modern times, why we have to talk about how Hezbollah is building sleeper cells and working with, countries and targeting Panama and then using Venezuela as a place to actually, finance some of their activities and to work with the drug cartels. And now, for the first time ever, in September, a month after Iran establishes direct flights with Venezuela, Venezuelans just so happen to top Mexicans for the first time in illegal border crossings. I'm sure it has nothing to do with anything. Venezuelans top Mexicans for the largest group of nationals arrested for illegally crossing the U.S. southern border for the first time on record in the month of September. According to its latest monthly report released Saturday, U.S. Customs and Border Protection recorded 218,763 encounters of people from all nationalities between ports of entry along the southwest border in September of 2023, representing a 21% increase from the 181,084 illegal immigrants caught in August. Why was that increase just suddenly so high? I have no idea. Venezuelans were arrested 54,833 times by the Border Patrol after entering from Mexico in September, more than double from the 22,090 arrests in August and well above the previous monthly high of 33,749 arrests in September of 2022. For decades, Mexicans accounted for the vast majority of illegal crossings, but flows shifted over the last decade to Central Americans and more recently to people from South America, Africa, and Asia. Okay? Look. I'm not, this is just what's being put out there. I'm just connecting dots by reading a few years back, reading a few months back, reading yesterday. And I'm sorry if I'm a little bit worked up here, but I'm really trying to drive this point home. Like, all of this is connected. Like, these aren't isolated incidents. These are not, just coincidences. Just because it's happening somewhere far away doesn't mean there's no possibility of it happening here. If operate like you're in World War III, which means you view this information through the lens of World War III, and then you realize that this invasion occurring at our southern border likely has ties to some of our direct enemies at this point in time, like the White House just told us, right? The White House said that these attacks are being facilitated directly by Iran that are happening in Iraq and Syria right now on U.S. bases. We're going to talk about more of those escalations here in a minute, but you understand that these are all connected. And if you view it through that filter of World War III, you know that Venezuela is directly connected to an adversary we currently have based on alliances and everything else in that region. And they have the, easy possibility of sending people up through our southern border. So now, just to kind of solidify that point, to understand where these battle lines are being drawn and who's on whose side, this is also new information from this past week that just goes to show you exactly who's affected, okay, and how close these alliances are. October 18th, 2023, Radio Free Europe, okay? U.S. imposes new sanctions on support network for Iran's missile and drone programs. Well, we know that their drones have been used in Ukraine. We know that they're using their drones right now when it comes to targeting U.S. bases in the Middle East, as well as targets in Israel, most likely. A lot of these things are being intercepted by our strike fleet that happens to be over there now. The U.S. Treasury Department on October 18th announced new sanctions on 11 individuals, 8 entities, and 1 vessel that the United States says have enabled Iran's destabilizing ballistic missile and unmanned aerial vehicle programs. The individuals, entities, and vessel designated by the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control are based in Iran, Hong Kong, China, and Venezuela. I don't know what else you want from me here. I'm trying my best, and I appreciate all of you in the chat. I know I'm not interacting with the chat a whole ton right now because I'm trying to get this information to everyone. And I hope you understand. I do my best to formulate a conversation with current events and, of course, some historical events in order to build all the context around it for us to have that conversation. But I also try to bring you a different perspective about information that maybe isn't being as widely discussed, because I don't want to just repeat the echo chamber here in the preparedness community, or even in the, let's just call it the alt culture community when it comes to media, right? I could just go ahead and say all the same stuff everybody else is talking about right this second, but that's not valuable if you've already had that conversation. So let's have a different conversation about something more pressing, or at least something that's still relevant to the current scenario, okay? The persons designated today have materially supported Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Ministry of Defense, and Armed Forces Logistics, or their subordinates in the production and proliferation of missiles and UAVs. Iran's reckless choice to continue its proliferation of destructive UAVs and other weapons prolongs numerous conflicts in the region around the world, Treasury Undersecretary Brian E. Nelson added in the news release. Now, how many of you would have coupled Venezuela in this conversation had I not read this to you directly? How many of you would have said, okay, Iranian drones and Iranian ballistic missiles, obviously they're getting help from Russia. They're probably getting help from China. We know that they're bad guys, right? Who would have literally said, and Venezuela, right? But Venezuela is very close to us. Very close. Venezuela is not the Middle East, right? Venezuela is not Ukraine. Venezuela is not very far away, okay? In fact, I'm going to just find out right now. How far is Venezuela from the U.S.? Let's just do that together, okay? 2,972 miles. Not too far. Oh, and it's telling me where I'm at here in North Dakota, so that's great. You see why this is important, okay? So, well, Magic Prepper, I'm sure not up, I'm sure not, all of South America has a lot of this stuff going on, and I'm sure this is just like an isolated thing. Maybe. But let's find out. Gregor Zamina, I appreciate that. I will keep it up. I'm trying my best here, and I did want to jump in the chat for a second to say hi to everybody. Prepper Now, thanks for being here. Don't be worried about being late. I saw Northern Girl Hobbies was here earlier. I've seen Exile Reviews here. I appreciate you guys so much for modding. I really do. And I hope this conversation is helping anyone who's listening right now, because I know I can be boring sometimes, and I'm like, here's some historical evidence. And everyone's like, great, Jeopardy again. But without it, it's hard to understand like where we stand, right? So I try my best there. Now, we have other things happening in South America. Who would have known? Not me. Okay. Bomb threats against Israeli and U.S. embassies in Argentina found to be false alarms. Interesting. Well, we have issues happening at embassies all over the world. But this is just a quick reminder. Right now, they're saying that they were false alarms. Who knows at this point in time? What's the purpose behind it? Not really sure. It's clearly in regards to the current conflict. Otherwise, they want to be targeting these two specific entities. It should let you know that there's at least somebody in Argentina who's willing to commit a crime in order to get their point across. The Israeli embassy received an emailed bomb threat on Wednesday morning. The embassy has confirmed to the Herald. The U.S. embassy in Buenos Aires also received an emailed bomb threat, according to the Argentine police. So our embassy, which, by the way, is United States soil based on how international law works with embassies, and the Israeli embassy are receiving bomb threats in South America, not just in the Middle East and not just here in the States or not just in Israel, right? Like in South America, our embassies are receiving bomb threats. Not where you would have expected this type of activity to occur, right? But this stuff is happening. So let's go ahead and talk about some other embassy-related threats that are also occurring. And now this part of the conversation is more to give you an idea of just how escalatory things have become and how quickly this whole thing is evolving into something much more dangerous. So I don't want us to go to war with Iran. I don't want us to go to war in general. But not wanting us to go to war was a sentiment I held a few years ago, right? Understanding now that we're already in a war is more productive. Being upset about, I don't want to go to war. What do you mean? Like, what do you really mean by that? You don't want to go to war. We have two strike groups out over at the Middle East right now. We've got all of our issues going on with Taiwan and China. We've got all of the military and financial support that we're sending to Ukraine. We've got all the military and financial support we're sending to Israel. We're in a war. Like, we're in war. Congress not declaring it doesn't matter to me. That's like Congress saying, okay, you can own an AR-15 now. I don't care what you said, Congress. Anyway, someone's going to quote that out of context. Next thing I know, it's going to be some weird meme. Fine with me. Okay. Iraq. U.S. officials issue travel warning. Evacuate eligible and non-essential personnel in Iraq due to increased security threats as of October 22nd. I'm pretty sure that's yesterday. Okay. So get out of here with your cookies, man. I don't want it. U.S. officials issue travel warning. Evacuate eligible. Why? It's going to make me read it again. I don't want to do that. The U.S. Department of State issued a travel advisory on October 22nd, urging American citizens to avoid traveling to Iraq due to increased terrorism risk, kidnapping, and armed conflict, and the limited capacity to support U.S. personnel. The travel advisory followed the October 20th ordered evacuation of qualified family members and non-essential personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and the U.S. Consulate General in Erbil amid increased security threats against U.S. government personnel and interests, likely over the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. A visibly heightened security presence is to be anticipated in the near term in the vicinity of U.S. sites in the country. The evacuation of additional U.S. personnel in Iraq is possible in the coming days. On-site services and document delivery to and from diplomatic missions will likely be disrupted until further notice. That's a sign of the times. Okay? Why are they doing this? Because we're under attack in those regions. We talked about that at the very start of this live stream. So if you just got here or if you're on the replay and you skip through some things, at the very beginning of the live stream, I talked about some breaking information. Today, it was told to us by our own government that Iran is facilitating these attacks in Iraq and Syria on American targets. And we also had Joe Biden suddenly leave a press conference saying he had to quickly go to the situation room, whatever that means. Like I said, we speculated it could be a bathroom break for all we know. But we also know that things are at heightened tensions right now to the point where the president going to the situation room suddenly during a press conference is probably not very unlikely. So these places are being evacuated based on the fact that they're being attacked. And yes, even CNN can report on this from time to time. I told you I try to reference all different perspectives, even if I highly disagree with them 99.9% of the time. U.S. shoots down 3 one-way attack drones targeting U.S. forces in Iraq within 24 hours. This came out on October 18th. But this is just to remind you that these attack drones are going to our bases to kill Americans. Like that's their purpose. They're not just there to put on a show, right? We're shooting them down. If we didn't, what would happen? You tell me. Pretty sure they would accomplish their mission. So if we didn't have the air defenses that we have, these drones would likely be successful, meaning that American lives would be lost based on whoever's sending these attacks. And we know exactly what that means thereafter now, don't we? The U.S. shot down 3 one-way attack drones targeting U.S. forces in Iraq, according to the U.S. military, as American embassies face protests in a number of Middle East countries because of the war in Gaza. In western Iraq, the U.S. intercepted 2 drones, destroying one and damaging the other. The attack resulted in minor injuries to coalition forces, U.S. Central Command said in a statement. A second attack in northern Iraq consisted of a single drone, which was destroyed, resulting in no injuries or damage. In this moment of heightened alert, we are vigilantly monitoring the situation in Iraq and the region, the statement about the attack said. It is unclear at this point who launched the drones or how they were shot down, but such attacks are frequently attributed to Iran or Iranian-backed militias in the region. And that's the thing. We know who sent them. We just didn't tell the press who sent them specifically. But it's very obvious that the United States government's very well aware of who sent these drones, which is why things are probably escalating to the level that they're escalating to. And one thing to keep in mind, and hold on, this requires a quick coffee break. Had to wet the whistle, as they say. One thing to keep in mind. Israel is our ally, regardless of your opinion of Israel, regardless of anything that you think or feel about it, they're the ally of the United States of America. So, we're going to act when an ally is under attack, or else our alliances mean nothing, right? And if we're attacked, we're going to react in the same fashion. So if our bases are under attack, we're going to retaliate. We're not going to just defend. At a certain point, retaliation is required in order to eliminate further attacks. And like we're already in this war. Israel's our ally. They're under attack now. And there's lots of evidence that, Lebanon's involved when it comes to Hezbollah. And we have the Hamas situation, of course, in Iran. It's facilitating attacks on our bases and obviously on Israel. So no matter how you feel about Israel, they're an ally. And if they're at war, we are at war. That's how alliances work, right? We're not necessarily in the same situation with Ukraine as we are with Israel. Okay. Let's talk about why we just sent a second carrier group to the Middle East as well as anti-air defense systems. Okay. And this came out today. So this war is not like an overnight kind of a deal, unfortunately for everyone. Warrior Maven reporting today, or 13 hours ago, citing escalating Iran threats. Notice how they keep mentioning Iran. We're not talking about Hamas anymore directly. We're not even talking about Hezbollah at this point. We're talking about Iran straight up. Citing escalating Iran threats, Pentagon sends second carrier, Patriot missiles, and THAAD to Middle East. Austin is adding a second carrier strike group to the area and activated the deployment of Patriot and Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile Systems. I didn't want to say defense twice. President Biden and the Defense Secretary, sometimes the coffee also does that to my brain. President Biden and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin have made rapid moves to add missile defense and naval forces to the Middle East in response to escalations by Iran and its proxy forces. The USS Ford and its supporting carrier strike group has been in the eastern Mediterranean Sea for at least a week. And now Austin is adding a second carrier strike group to the area and activated the deployment of Patriot and Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile Defense Systems to the region. One carrier strike group wasn't enough because we're not talking about Hamas anymore. I really want you to soak this all in. Following detailed discussions with President Biden on recent escalations by Iran and its proxy forces across the Middle East region, today I directed a series of additional steps to further strengthen the Department of Defense posture in the region. I mean, I thought one United States carrier strike group was a pretty good posture, in all honesty. My understanding is that, it's pretty much capable of anything you can imagine. So, two, what's the expectation, right? Austin has ordered that the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier strike group be redirected to join the USS Ford in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is quite significant as the U.S. Navy has already trained for dual carrier operations, the kind of interoperability which would enable a massive air attack campaign from the sea. The USS Ford, as a new high-tech carrier, already operates with a much larger deck space and the ability to maintain a 33% increase in a sortie rate. Adding the USS Eisenhower strike group can add very large amounts of additional air power, particularly in the event that the two carriers are networked and can maintain interoperability and coordinate operations. This carrier strike group is an addition to the USS Gerald Ford, our Ford carrier strike group, which is currently operating in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. It will further increase our force posture and strengthen our capabilities and ability to respond to a range of contingencies. Patriot missile batteries and THAAD systems will clearly offer a protective envelope for U.S. forces in the region and parts of Israel potentially vulnerable to long-range ballistic missiles from Iran. The specific location of the Patriot and THAAD were not mentioned, likely for security reasons. Really? Yet these kinds of missile defense systems can protect U.S. and Israeli forces. While the Patriot of the Gulf War era proved capable of knocking out Scuds, and the weapon has shown capable of destroying multiple kinds of ballistic missiles, today's Patriot is arguably positioned to counter Iran's dangerous arsenal of cruise missiles. I can't talk tonight. It's fine. An interesting analysis on Iran Watch cites what it terms deployed and possibly deployed cruise missiles of various ranges. The longest range cruise missile cited in the analysis is the now deployed Pave LACM, capable of traveling up to 1,600 kilometers. Yet Iran Watch also specifies two newer, possibly deployed cruise missiles with unknown ranges called the Meshkat Sumar and the Hovazeh. Parts of Western Iran, given this weapons range, could be capable of targeting Israel, and of course Iranian proxies can likely fire from them much closer ranges as well. This places Israel and U.S. forces at risk in the region to a very high degree, although the kind of guidance and target tracking technologies built into Iran's cruise missiles may not be fully known. So, if this doesn't sound like an escalation, what is? Okay. Now, there's a couple things I can think of for why this is suddenly deemed necessary. One of those things could be that this is happening in the Mediterranean, right? What else is happening in the Mediterranean? Well, there certainly is a lot of Russian naval activity in the Mediterranean now, isn't there? And I wonder if there is any concept of them possibly getting involved or something happening in that area. I'm not sure. But you know how Russia is like one of our main adversaries that's also a nuclear superpower? Well, we also have China. And I wonder if this could be why we decided to send a second carrier strike group into the Mediterranean to support the first one. Israel war. 6 Chinese Navy warships stationed in the Middle East amid U.S. Navy's heavy presence in the region. They got to have their piece too, I guess, right? Amid the war between Israel and the Hamas militant group in the Gaza Strip, up to 6 Chinese warships have been operating in the Middle East over the past week, according to the Chinese Ministry of Defense. Now, this is from October 21st, so 2 days ago. According to a statement from the Chinese Ministry of Defense, the 44th Naval Escort Task Force has been in regular operations in the region since May. Last week, they also conducted a joint exercise with the Omani Navy during a visit to Oman. Following the successful completion of its visit to Oman, the Chinese Naval Escort Task Force arrived at Shuwak Port in Kuwait as scheduled on the morning of October 18th. The Chinese maritime group embarked on a 5-day goodwill visit to Kuwait. Guided by Kuwaiti naval patrol craft Falaka, warships of the Chinese task force, including Ship Zibo, Ship Jingzhou, and Ship Quandohu. I know it's like Qindaohu, but we got this. Docked at Shuwaiq Port, Kuwait, at around 9 o'clock in the morning. They were welcomed by more than 200 people, including representatives of the Kuwaiti military, staff of the Chinese embassy in Kuwait, and overseas Chinese, the Chinese MOD said. So, we have China, Russia, and the US all operating in the Mediterranean, as well as Iran, don't forget. Now, we also know that Iran is in Panama, right? Well, who else do you think's in Panama? The whole crew. I don't think you send a second carrier strike group to an area without the expectation of needing it. And the only reason I say that is because the possibility of Taiwan suddenly erupting into a conflict exists, right? And that second carrier strike group is very far from that at this point in time, right? We have all these other escalatory areas to concern ourselves with, but we beefed up the one there in the Mediterranean, which should kind of tell you where our thought process is in the sense of where things are going to get bad. I'm trying my best here to explain all this in a way that's digestible, but also pushes you in the right direction to kind of understand how these dots connect. Our biggest threat is already here in the United States. And these cells, it doesn't matter who they are. Like that, and that's why I've been trying to kind of push this narrative. Like, if you're just concerned about Hamas or Hezbollah attacking us here on our soil, like you're not thinking like large enough based on how interconnected all these things are. Venezuela is connected to Iran. Iran's connected to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is connected to Venezuela, right? Like it's all part of the same equation. The drug cartels are connected to Venezuela, which are also connected to Iran. The drug cartels are connected to Mexico. And the drug cartels operate here within the country. The drug cartels also operate with the terrorist cells that are here in the country. We also know that certain entities within our own country are in bed with the drug cartels. So this is not just a singular entity to concern yourself with. Like, this is everybody. Who finances the drug cartels? Well, China does. Right? They provide them with the necessary resources for fentanyl, and they also provide them with the financial resources required. How many lines can you go down before you realize that like every single one of these groups is connected to the other one that's an adversary, and that all of them are a problem? It's not just Hamas. It's not just Hezbollah. We're in World War III. Look at it through the lens of that mindset. And then you'll see that let's just call it like the Axis enemies are all working together to destroy us, right? So we know who they are now. It's not just one group doing one thing. If one of them does something, it's all of them doing something. And as long as you can see things through that lens, you can understand just how widespread this issue really is and how vulnerable we are here in the States, especially 54,000 Venezuelans arrested at the border trying to cross illegally. The Hamas attack on Israel was estimated to be about 1,000 armed men. 1,000. That's all it took to enact those atrocities among the people there, right? What about 54,000? What do you think they'd be capable of? Oh, and by the way, not just financed by Iran or Hamas, right? Financed by China and the drug cartels and everybody else involved with smuggling people across the border. Venezuela, right? So I really hope this conversation kind of like showed all of those dots being connected, because that was the goal of my conversation with you tonight. It really was. Now, look, I do have my private live stream going on over on Subscribestar. So or for the Subscribestar members, as well as for the YouTube channel members. So if you guys are a YouTube channel member or a part of Subscribestar, make sure you come hang out. It's about an hour long. It starts at 9:30 tonight, or 9:45, sorry. And it is just us hanging out. You guys can just hit me up in the chat. I talk about things more casually, share my opinions. We talk about things that are more off topic or whatever you want it to be. But I do it as a thank you to those of you who are supporting me through those channels, right? So Subscribestar, I just put a link in the live chat if you're interested. It's $5 a month. But I do send out preparedness incentives. Last month, I sent out another Midway USA range bag as well as a T-shirt, which is definitely worth more than $5. But it's just something I try to do to make it worth everybody's time, because I appreciate the support more than I can actually articulate. And I'm just a guy trying my best to get people to prepare. And I get a lot of criticism from time to time because people are like, well, you're not an expert on this particular topic, or you haven't served and therefore you don't really know how this equipment works, or whatever it might be. And I understand my limitations regarding those things. What I'm not an expert in and what I haven't had experience in are all limitations, 100%. But my goal is just to help spread more information and give people more ideas about what they can do to get better prepared. And then I glean some of the ideas I receive in the feedback from all of you and apply it to my preparedness as well. So, if anything, if you want to look at me as someone who's going through a similar journey as anyone else who doesn't have that experience, you can learn from my mistakes more easily than having to make them yourself. And that's kind of a lot of what I try to do here. So, I appreciate all the support. Like, all of you are very, very greatly appreciated. And my goal here, more than anything else, is just to help you prepare, whether or not that's through a motivational conversation, whether or not that's through being able to strategically plan for things that are more likely based on the current threat level, or whether or not that's through gear reviews or just concepts, right? Like, if I don't show you things that are available to you, then you might not know about them. People will be like, oh, Magic Prepper, you're telling people about, a red dot site. Everyone knows about red dot sites. Well, you'd be surprised how many people maybe don't, because that's not their area of expertise or focus, or that's their first time acquiring something and they're looking for information about it. So I try my best to keep it versatile, and applicable. And all of you being here on nights like tonight make me more motivated to keep doing what I do. So I 100% sincerely thank all of you for being here. Let's see. We have John Doe 1776. I appreciate you as well. Thank you as well. Rip Curl Readiness. Thank you so much for being here, being a mod, and always having great input. Rip Curl, in case you all don't know, if I put out a video about something related to guns, like, he's got like 100 other things he wants to tell you about that are all relevant and applicable and might, help you make a better decision. So big thanks for that. I appreciate it. Mr. John 75. I appreciate that too. I am not a know-it-all and I'm not a fanatic. You're right. I am just trying my best. I'm a regular dude. Like, my very first job was as a bag boy at a grocery store, and I did that for 2 years while I was in high school, riding my bike to work. Regular guy, did not grow up with a silver spoon. A lot of people think so. Oh, Magic Prepper, he's rich. Nope. Worked as a bag boy at a grocery store for 2 years. And after that, worked at a restaurant. So, just doing the best I can, right? But I appreciate every single one of you. You're amazing people. And if you all need anything from me, magicprepper.com, there's a contact form there. There's also a link to the Discord there. If you don't know about the Discord, check it out, hang out. It gets a little crazy in there sometimes, but we have mods that do a great job over there for that as well, and I appreciate them too. And I guess, as usual, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.